Welcome to Accounting Excellence 2018. This is the first live webcast in a new series of events from Accounting Web. We're going to run them all through the year, every month, on different technology and topics. Some of you may have seen Practice Excellence broadcasts before. Well, this is even better because it takes in practice and business throughout the year. This episode is all about the tax challenges and digital tax challenges facing small businesses and their advisors, and we'd love to thank QuickBooks for their support in making this event possible. That's allowed us to assemble a crack panel of accountants and tech experts, led by Rebecca Bennyworth on my left, Fiona Fraser from Fraser Plus Accountants, and Nick Williams from Intuit QuickBooks. Just to get us going, Rebecca, can you just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your overview of the tax challenge and compliance challenge for a small business?
Hi John, well it's nice to be back here at Accounting Web. Lots of your members will know me. I'm Rebecca Bennyworth. I'm best known as a speaker and writer on tax probably, which members watching will gather I'm having a bit of a problem with this week, but of course I'm also a practitioner. So I've got a small practice which I'm looking to build up as I go forward. So what's the biggest challenges? I just think the amount of change, the huge volume of change that practitioners and their clients have to assimilate and work out what do they need to do.
Fiona, what about you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Fiona Fraser. I'm from Perth, Scotland. I've got a small practice up there. I've been in business for about 18 years. And broadly speaking, I agree completely with Rebecca. It's the volume of change. And on top of that is how to communicate it to your clients so they actually hear what you're saying. And then to marry that with the digital and technology changes, because you get emails every day about, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And what do you choose?
Okay, next question. And Nick, how about you?
Yeah, Nick Williams. I'm head of business development with Intuit QuickBooks. I've been in the tech space for 15 years. And just echoing everything you've said there, both it's how we best sort of marry the challenges of, compliance with the opportunity that technology can support with that change. But I do take on board there's a lot of challenges ahead of us and exciting times, I have to say.
Okay, so we've established there's a lot of change about. Our mission, guys, is in the next 40 minutes we want to kind of send the viewers away with as many practical ideas and kind of strategies for managing that volume of change. It's not just going to be all about us mouthing off. The people viewing live are able to communicate to us. If you look in the chat window beside where you're viewing this video now, you can type your questions in to Rebecca, Nick or Fiona, and I'll be monitoring that and try and put them to them during the conversation, and at the end, in about 35 minutes, we'll actually go back to the questions and follow some of them up here. If you aren't able to follow along everything, or you need some reference information, and I think there are going to be some numbers coming out from Rebecca, don't worry, because Rebecca has prepared a small business tax handbook that will set out all the kind of current calculations and thinking of just what this year's tax challenges are. I think that's it. Do feel free to take part. The more you get involved while watching, the more interesting and relevant it will be to you and to the other practitioners like you watching. But let's just get on to we need to. There's too much to focus on, really. So maybe can the three of you help us start narrowing in? Rebecca, what do you think the most pressing challenge is this year?
I think the most pressing challenge with MTD coming down the track, albeit some of it from a distance, is to get clients onto digital record keeping. I see that as absolutely essential. That is, for me, my number one job now for the next few months.
And what do you do?
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca. They have to do it, and they have to do it now. But also, it's what model they use going forward, whether they're companies, partnerships, sole traders, because those calculations have changed and keep changing.
And are there any particular rule changes or tax policies that you think might cause the most friction with your clients this year?
I think it's the tax on the dividends is causing issues, because they were used to getting up to the basic rate tax-free, and this year in January some of them were hugely shocked. They had a tax bill, even though they'd been informed it was still a shock that there was a tax bill, and it's going to get higher when the rate goes down.
Okay.
And it might not be the most tax efficient way for them to do it. depending on their profits. So.
Okay, well, I think we'll kick that around with Rebecca in a second. But again, Nick, we want your view as well. Make sure we cover all the bases.
No, entirely. Two parts. Obviously, MTD, getting ready for digital records, but let's not forget GDPR. That's just literally around the corner. So preparing for that and how technology can support that.
Yeah, but I mean, technology you want to promote as a tool that will help people with compliance, but you've got to remember these days there's also compliance issues around technology, and that's in the shape of the general data protection regulation. Right. So, it's small business tax compliance is what we're leading with, but we'll come back to that maybe later. You can tell us a bit more about that, Nick. But Rebecca, let's get down to it. I've got a great business idea. I've turned up on your doorstep. I might come and go and ask Fiona. I'm shopping around for advisors, but what are the factors for a prospective business client that you're going to have to consider on their behalf this year?
Well, I think one of the first things to think about is what is the proper vehicle for your business, whether it be sole trader, a partnership or a limited company. Now, in some sectors, they're forced to go down the limited route because of IR35 and these sorts of things. But let's assume we've got an open choice. For many, many years, the answer would normally be, well, limited company because the tax is cheaper and you don't pay any NI. It's not the case anymore. Since the changes in dividend tax a few years ago, it's very unlikely to be a sensible thing when your profits are less than about 50,000. Because although you might save a couple of hundred in tax, the extra admin costs, the extra accountancy bills, to be frank, are going to be far more than that. So it's a case of working it through. I mean, there are really two factors in play when trying to decide about this. What are your profits going to be and how much of them are you going to take out? And in my small business tax handbook, I've set all of this out, all the calculations, so people can see how it works. But, back to the start, John, you've got a brilliant idea. How much money are you going to make? And how much of that money do you want to take out to pay your mortgage or your food? It's really a challenge, but my gut now normally says, go sole trade for a bit. So if you have to invest in something, let's say you buy yourself an electric car to use in the business, you've got tax loss, set it off against last year's salary, repayment of tax. So that's, in short, that's my view. But what viewers will be able to do is plough through all the backing numbers when they get the handout.
But Fiona, I mean, are you finding complications around the structures and just the small business tax approach, your experience with clients?
I think one of the issues is sometimes they don't ask. Clients will come to you and they've been trading for a little while and they've finally got, oh my goodness, I've got to do a tax return, I've got to get my accounts in. That's when they think, I need an accountant. So they skip the asking for advice at the beginning and they come to you. And then you're just left with a hand that you have to play. So sometimes you haven't got the luxury of saying, actually, you'd have been better off self-employed. Also, new businesses, they always overestimate. They always think they're going to make far more money far quicker than most of them do. I mean, hopefully within a 3-year time lag, they catch up with themselves, but they don't get there on year one. So I agree with Rebecca, if you go sole trader to start off with, you get an idea. And if it doesn't work, and some businesses don't work, that's fine. You go and get a job, you carry on as normal. You don't have all the rigmarole of having to unravel what you set up. And I've had some very silly little companies set up by people.
Yeah. Although, do you think the conditions in the government's approach to small company tax, I mean, there was the disincorporation initiative a few years ago. Do you think they're turning a dial in such a way that you might have to consider unraveling some clients who have incorporated? Is that
I think, John, I think the disincorporation measure was really there for those who stampeded in when we had that nil rate of corporation tax and all of that, and probably don't belong in limited company land because they just can't hack it. And listeners will know what I mean. I think that below 50,000, I do think that there is an argument for disincorporating, but I don't think government has got a policy about where they would prefer businesses to be. I think government policy really drives that whatever business entity you're in, government would quite like to take the same amount of tax off you. And of course, that's not the case. So, I mean, I don't know about you, Fiona, but I'm starting to think good old-fashioned husband and wife partnerships, or I maybe should say spousal partnerships, civil partnerships. But they're a cracking way to set up a business if both of you are involved, because you're using both of the personal allowances.
Yeah, both of the basic rate tax bands.
You know, that's like old hat, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, wife's wages or husband's wages is very old hat. But we're going back to a place where actually you've got to think about these things. Limited companies are not the answer to everything anymore.
And I mean, you mentioned IR35 earlier. This is the week when we've had the Krista Ackroyd appeal decision where she's lost her appeal.
Yeah.
So she's trapped in the new IR35 rules. But again, some people are kind of being required to set up, you know, the public service people is often being required to set up and operate through limited companies. With the person maybe with a fairly single client commitment. Yeah. I mean, you know, will the picture with IR35, is that clear enough for you to know how to advise people at the moment, how to deal with it? You know, what do you read the situation as?
I think it's a mess, John. I think it's an absolute mess. The actual, you know, off payroll working in the public sector rules on their own are clear enough to know what the tax liabilities are, and I don't think there's much doubt about that. You've still got to answer the really difficult question about status in order to trigger it, but this time the risk is not on the small company and us as their advisor, it's on the public sector body. I think the reason I say it's a mess is that we're playing make-believe. We're making believe that this chap is an employee of the NHS or whoever it is, Bristol City Council, and he's not. And we're deducting PAYE and NIC, and then we come to try and account for it in the company. It's an absolute shambles. So I'm very nervous about that. I also think that the amount of this is driven by the desire of employers not to have employees. They don't want the pension, they don't want the sick pay, they don't want the holiday pay, they don't want the NIC. They shove them into limited companies without caring for a minute what's going on. And it's about time this all got sorted out. I mean, we have got the Taylor Review and government is looking at that. But I must admit, John, sometimes I despair. You know, it's such a mess. And what big business wants is units of labour. They don't want people. And that's, you know, sorry, I'll get off my hobby horse.
Sorry, well, I mean, how does it feel on the ground? Is IR35 complicating your advice to clients this year?
Yes and no, because as Rebecca says, it's the employer. So really, the big thing last year was when it was public sector and there was no rules. So you say, we're waiting for the HMRC calculator to come out. So clients were calling you up saying, what's all this about? I don't know. And you're saying, well, actually, I'm waiting too. And that is no way of advising anybody because you're just waiting. And then it's all employer driven. So even there was nothing you could say that would change the employees. And some employers were just going along and broad brushing everybody because they didn't want to take the risk. So therefore, everybody was in. And I don't think, I'm with Rebecca as well, is that if people have a project that they want done, they don't necessarily want to employ somebody. So I do get that there are companies who misuse it and make people, you know, people who should be employees, they make them set up limited companies. But then there are some genuine cases where actually somebody wants MTD developed, they don't want to employ somebody. They want somebody to come into an assigned piece of work. But these people are getting caught in IR35 as well. Yeah.
So you're not, there's just, you have to live with the uncertainty and you have to communicate the uncertainty to your clients.
So do the contractors. I had a call this week saying, so are they rolling it out to private sector?
We can hope not, but I don't think that's going to cut any ice. Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
no, exactly.
Really
yeah.
Again, maybe we'll find out on March the 13th with the spring statement.
Yeah,
so Rebecca, you're performing at QuickBooks Connect on the 27th. That's before, but you'll be when you come back in May on May 22nd. You know, maybe we will be talking about MTD then, but maybe we'll slip in a side order.
Absolutely, because we'll know a little bit more, maybe.
Now, I'd suggested that I'd talked about how the government's trying to turn the dial against incorporation, try and diminish it a little bit. MP sort of kind of picked up that. He wonders, with the dividends tax and the VAT flat rate, all the changes of government, is your feeling the government maybe has mitigated the tax gap to its satisfaction, and that it might start taking the foot off the necks of the one-person companies? Is the direction?
Well, the trouble is that incorporating and then voluntary registering for VAT and going on to the flat rate scheme was quite a good dodge, and it saved a lot of tax from an advisor standpoint. From a government standpoint, that was unsustainable, and so changes had to come through, and I sort of understand that. Do they think they've closed the tax gap enough? There'll still be things popping up here and there, and I think they'll still be vigilant, because we've got an NHS starved of cash. I mean, I won't get into all the politics, because I'm not bothered about the politics, actually. There's only one place this money comes from, really, and that's taxpayers. And if taxpayers find a way of paying less, then government has got to find a way of correcting that, evening it up.
And that's always the old game that we continue to play. Paul Jackson did want a technical clarification on the £50,000 profit, being the kind of level at which it's worth incorporating on. He wanted to ask, did you mean that before the director's salary, or is it? Yeah,
before director's salary. So as you'll see when you get the handbook, for those watching, I've done all the detailed calculations, but broadly, the reason at 50,000 it's a break point, and it's a bit of a complicated one, but as a sole trader, you are a higher rate taxpayer at 50,000. If in the company you've got 50,000 profit and you take a salary of 8.4 is the new figure for next year, that means no nick. Pay corporation tax, take all the rest out as dividend, you save about £2,000 in tax. And that's purely because sole trader, 40%, limited company, not in 40% tax. So it's that little band. Even if you take all of the money out, it's that little band that you get this saving on. But people will be able to see all the figures and where it turns in the opposite direction, which it certainly does. You get to a point where you're worse off if you make more money. So, yeah, that's what I meant.
And Nick, you're well out of this. This is the typical stuff that people have to program into tax software. You're not in that territory at the moment, but do you and your colleagues on the sort of product management front have to start monitoring this? Because it looks like the direction of technology travel is that more of the tax calculations are kind of getting closer and closer to the bookkeeping applications. Do you sense that? Is that a concern that you talk about in the company?
Yeah, well, I think in two parts. Firstly, if I may just go back to the previous discussion, in terms of a technology advice layer. I mean, we see sole traders, self-employed, they need technology to manage that line that's being blurred between sort of personal and business expense. So that's the first thing I would say. But it's a great opportunity just to play back my very first point. But yeah, in terms of sort of the computation, we're seeing more and more of that being put onto the accounting, to the bookkeeping within our and other software platforms. That work will be done to then better proactively advise clients. Yeah. And I'm going to come back to that word proactive advice, because with the speed at which things are changing, with the sort of rapid changes in tax challenges, those firms that we're seeing that are most effective are those that can do effective tax planning for their small business or sole traders, whoever it may be.
Yeah. I must admit, actually, you saying proactive advice, I must admit the biggest change for me is that those clients that I have got onto digital record keeping, now we're seeing things like underpricing issues, which you don't see 9 months after the year end, or if you do, it's too late. We're seeing this product line is underpriced because we can see the transactions going through. So we're contacting clients to say, can we come and have a talk about pricing? And or this line is going much better than anything else, maybe you're better focusing on that. Yeah. And I find having all the accounts at my fingertips, I'm not running to catch up. I'm ahead of them there. Right. And I find that absolutely transformed my practice. Yeah. What I do, how I advise my clients. Yeah. I'm loving it.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, you see the two scenarios. A business who either is chasing their accountant, not a good place to be, or to your point, who is actually hearing from their bookkeeper or accountant, in a proactive way of
Yeah.
managing age debt, managing
Yeah.
price discounts. I mean, it's a whole new game.
I mean, Fiona, everybody watching today is, accountants have to get on top of the compliance issues for business. But then that's always the frustration we hear about, is that it's, what my accountant's only ever interested in
Filling in my
these
tax
complicated tax
Yeah.
spreadsheets they spend their lives creating. Does your compliance knowledge and advice, are you able to sort of switch out of that let's get your tax right into let's get your business right mode? How do you negotiate that with clients?
I think it's Rebecca and Nick are right, and now you can actually see what's going on. So even the simple things, if somebody wants you to do a mortgage application, you have the information, and you depending on the client, you might be 10 months. They might be 31st of January giving you books. They don't know how much tax they have to pay. The whole thing is you can be so much more on top of it. So if somebody's profits have increased dramatically, you can be telling them in the summer, you're going to have this tax bill in January. So they're not crying down the telephone at you when you're telling them how much tax they owe.
Yeah.
Because funnily enough, when they make money, they don't think they're going to have to pay more tax. So, you avoid all these things that it's horrible when you've got somebody crying down the phone saying, I didn't think I had to. I said, well, you did double your turnover. But you can do it because you're far more active. You can be far more active. And so it works. And that's why I like it.
Okay, we're going to look a little bit further forward in a second, but Nick, you did mention GDPR to us earlier, so we've got to come back to you. What are the compliance requirements there? Fairly briefly, but we should get it out there.
Yeah, just at a high level. So in terms of, we need to be ready by May. This is all about how, we as both professions across technology and in the accounting industry manage and store your clients' information. So it's about how that is stored and protected with all of the sort of privacy laws that go with it. And what I would say is when you think of the challenge ahead, if you just pause and take a very large step back and think of all the multiple software systems and storage that is out there today, spreadsheets emailed, USB sticks left on desks, servers in the corner that aren't password protected, it's time now that businesses need to be advised appropriately through the relevant channels to make sure that this is all above board. But people should not underestimate the size of the task ahead.
But again, standardizing, streamlining, using one, not the spreadsheet here and the one kind of software there. And so if you can automate and standardize
Entirely.
that it makes your own data compliance a bit easier. Okay, it's
But
been.
it's also, John, if
yeah.
I can just come in, making sure that clients are aware, even if the personal data they hold is minimal, that clients are aware that if you're running payroll on your own computer, then your computer needs a password on it. I will say, I'm sure you'll do a session on this, but I will say there's an absolutely brilliant resource on the ICO website which actually says to you, here's what you have to do, and you can go down and tick it off and it'll give you a state of readiness. So that's what I'm using. So yeah, but it is quite scary.
And everything all set and tight with you on...
No, if you want the honest answer, no, because
Work in progress.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
You get through January, you fall over, you pick yourself up, you then have to do everything that you didn't do in January that you should have done because you were doing tax returns, and then you look at black clouds on the horizon and think, okay, need to look at this one
That's
now.
our next black cloud.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think there is one coming up probably in March, it'll probably be, or probably April. So GDPR, we will have a webcast on that as well, and there is already one in the can from last October, so there's plenty of resources on Accounting Web. Now, there's been a shadow over this conversation, and we've mentioned the letters a few times, but MTD, we can't ignore that. It's not applying this year, technically, so but April the 6th, 2019, the MTD filers are all crossing into MTD land. Can you just give us an overview, Rebecca?
Yeah.
What do you think the likely timetable is just up to that point, and what are the key worry points for practitioners this year?
Okay, so let's get it out on the table what you're going to have to do. The mandation will apply to VAT only. So VAT returns must be filed through the MTD channel from your first VAT period on or after 1st of April 19. I'm pretty sure that that's how that commencement's going to go. Now, you won't change your pattern of filing VAT returns. So if you file quarterly, annually, monthly, you will still file in the same way. You'll still use flat rate scheme or whatever schemes you're using. What the differences are, number one, you must keep digital records. Number two, you must file without manual intervention. In other words, you cannot print some figures out and retype them somewhere. It's got to go straight through the system. Now, for advisors, focus on the mandated group, which is businesses over the VAT threshold. Anyone under the VAT threshold is purely optional, and I suspect that means they won't be doing it to start with. So any of your people who are over the VAT threshold is pegged at 85 from now till 2020, so you know what it's going to be. Anyone over the VAT threshold, step one, digital records. Without digital records, you're going nowhere. So focus on those still using exercise books or whatever. Now, digital records does include spreadsheets, but when you come to submit from a spreadsheet, you will have to have some extra technology on the end that allows you to submit to HMRC. That technology is being developed. It's called bridging software. I am not putting anyone onto spreadsheets. I think they're last century, I'm afraid. I am a spreadsheet geek. I love them, but their day is coming to an end. So I'm putting everyone straight onto accounting software because it's so much easier. The guys you've got to really think about are partially exempt, motor traders using the margin scheme. You've also got to work tour operators, but maybe not. So anyone with special VAT affairs, take a bit more time, but everybody else, get them onto standard accounting software.
And how is your progress at preparing clients and
Not bad. I think we were quite early on. Went to a QuickBooks conference and just thought, why aren't people doing it? Because it's so easy. You know, it's easy for the client.
So you were
to
getting them into that environment on the assumption you were moving them to an income tax filing regime?
Or just because it was easier for them. To be honest, it was the direct bank feeds. It wasn't expensive. It was easy to use, and I thought it would save us a lot of time, and it has. So we'd already started the moving process before this happened, and we've done pretty well. We have a couple who are still on ledgers who will take a little bit more. Not convincing. They know they have to do it, but they're a little scared because they're 60 odd. Haven't really done. Can do emails, but aren't the generation who have the phone in the hand the whole time and can whiz things off at great speed. And I think the issue is going to be just getting enough of the right training in place and deciding who's capable of doing what, and not trying to make them do what they can't do.
Do you have any spreadsheet stragglers that you need to deal with?
Oh, yes.
Over your head? And will you keep, there will be this bridging soft tool, might...
No. I mean, I think even if I had people who refused, I would find a way of taking their spreadsheets and uploading them onto because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And I think that if it's a bridging software, and the clients who give you spreadsheets give them in a myriad of different ways that don't always make sense. You learn to work with them, but you look at them at first and you think, why?
Yeah.
And so it's not like there's a standardized spreadsheet. They do it how it suits them. So I would rather hook them up onto a bank feed, take their spreadsheets to analyse or do whatever I needed to do, and do it that way. I think it would be quicker.
Now, Nick, Lynn has asked us on MTD for VAT or VAT for MTD. Lynn's a sole practitioner considering new software, but her concern is, the HMRC is saying there will be a list of VAT compatible software for MTD. It'll be on the website later. So, do you have any idea when that list will be available, and how far is Intuit from delivering a VAT-ready MTD filing mechanism?
Great question. So firstly, and the answer to the first question, unsure with regards to the list. What I can say is we will be on the list, and we're working with the government in terms of our development now. We're excited. We are working with our accounting and bookkeeping partners and small business, and we are planning to get at least 12 months of runway to have our product ready to work with our partners
I mean, I've been looking into the API situation, and that the actual filing pipelines are due in March. I mean, I think some of them are coming out in January, but the actual how to file, the one to let you file the data is March. So, and then we go into the pilot scheme. Yeah. Our mission here is to sort of kind of equip viewers to deal with the challenges that come. So maybe can we go back around and find out with VAT, how are you actually working with clients? You mentioned you had some with exercise books and ledgers. So what is your sort of strategic approach to the MTD filing challenge next year?
Okay, a bit like Fiona, I had already been sold on the idea of getting clients onto bank streaming software, and that was really the work we did, John, with Frank from Bankstream. That's what got me into the idea of a direct bank feed. So I'd already been convinced, and I started last February putting a few clients on. Now if a client comes to me, they have to go straight onto it. I've got 3 that are going on in the next month. And what we're saying to them is, right, okay, if we've got a bank feed and you try and pay everything through the bank with your debit card, might have a bit of cash, but mostly they're that sort of business, then what we want you to do is to raise invoices. If we come along and show you how to raise invoices, and we'll make them look all pretty and upload your logo and all of that, if you can do that, then maybe we'll let you do a bit more. If you fail miserably at that, you can email us and we'll raise your invoices for you. And I'm thinking, the one guy I'm thinking will have to do that, only raise about a dozen a year, so it's no hardship. So what I'm doing is assessing, we talked about capability and that, I'm assessing what my clients I think can do, and I'll give them a little try, and if it frightens them, then we'll bring it in-house. I'm tending to go for service level pricing, so I'm not hours charging, and I'm also regarding the time I'm spending showing my clients how to use it as that's my time, that's overhead, that's investment in my business for the future, because if I don't invest, then in 4 or 5 years' time I'm not going to have a business, so that's fine by me, and they love it. I mean, what got me onto this, funnily enough, is about 2 years ago, I had a problem with a computer, got a chap in, he was doing what he was doing in the office and sorting this out. And he said, okay, can I take the address and all that? And he got his iPad out, and he emailed me an invoice. And I said, can I pay you by card? He said, yeah. And by the time he left my premises, he'd fixed it, given me an invoice, got paid. I thought, wow.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as an IT guy, he was into it, but really impressed me, really impressed me. And I've got one who's starting to do it on his mobile phone, do quotes and show them to people and things like that. So,
I think when you talk about that multi-device experience, and we have, as you've seen with many QuickBooks clients using all multiple devices, I think the thing I would layer on to advising clients is making sure that the technology is fit for them. So you've just mentioned a great example, like not doing invoices in the evening, doing invoices or estimates on the move via the smartphone. And we see that many times with accounting and bookkeeping firms. They say, well, how can I get, I've learned all about how to use QuickBooks. How can I get my clients to use this? Well, start with a mobile phone.
yeah.
And you'll be soon how they'll be looking at their balances, looking at their bank feeds, and you can bring them into the main.
So Fiona, how are you managing
Yeah,
your
I
clients?
moved a joiner from a desktop onto QuickBooks. He'd been using desktop for years, really sort of knew how to do it, didn't want to move. So sometimes you just have to tell people, he loves it because in his job he has downtime. He's sitting in the van for an hour because he's finished one job, he's off to another one. He can send his invoice out. He can check his bank. He can do all sorts of things where he would otherwise just have been hanging around. So
Playing Candy Crush or something.
Yeah, so it's a great use if they're, and he's quite technically savvy, so he can do it. So if they're technically savvy and they have downtime between things, it's brilliant, because then it's not this huge job at the end of the day that they don't want to do, because they come home and the computer's in the back bedroom, nobody wants to go in there.
Yeah. Rebecca, when you said before about efficiencies, if I may, when I take a lens of just the accounting market, one thing that's a real challenge is firms actually understanding how efficient they are today in their end-to-end process. In essence, how are they collecting data? How are they compiling data? Then how are they ultimately pushing that into compliance before even getting anywhere near any advisory? And I think even just doing that simple exercise of mapping out how firms today, the audience is watching, how they even get data in today. You'll think of the multiple sources where they're being inefficient. You know, it's somewhat demoralizing for members of staff to have to manually enter data. So I think I would recommend beginning there, mapping out the processes, look for areas of inefficiency, and then layer in the technology on top. I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's certainly something I've done with a firm I've been doing a bit of consultancy on, is we looked at what's happening now, how do you get data, how do you process that data, and then we looked at, right, where do you want to be, and then how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And really, really instructive, really instructive. I'm enjoying it. It's a new challenge for me, and it's made me much more enthusiastic about my process, because the one thing I know is that from now on, Januaries are going to get better.
Great. Great.
One question from the floor is, what's your views on putting clients through the VAT pilot for MTD? Do you think that's a go or a good way to get them ready and to get your firm ready? Or you, Trent?
I think if you've got a lot of clients going into MTD, I wouldn't necessarily jump day one, but I would, because it's a good learning curve for you as the advisor to find out how it's all going to work. I mean, in essence, it's probably not that different from what you do now if you're filing direct from your software. But I think it's worth trying it out so that and also I think it helps HMRC rub some of the corners off, because you can be saying this bit is a bit rubbish, and even more importantly, John, from next year, starting to put people into the income tax pilot. I really think, because I've looked at the period of change. So you've got MTD running at the same time as SA is coming to an end. Nightmare, absolute nightmare. So I would be encouraging people, yes, to put a few into the VAT pilot, but also be looking next year at putting one or two into the income tax pilot, and maybe a few more the following year, so that you've really got to grips with it by the time it gets potentially mandated.
What's your approach?
No, I agree. Not everybody, maybe one or two of the better behaved clients.
Yeah.
I mean, did you go into the income tax pilot in the
No.
past?
No, but now it's all digital and going that way. Yeah, because I would rather learn with a couple, and a couple that are quite good, before. I don't want to be learning while it's, you know what I mean? I would rather know a bit more than that before it went live, and I had to do it for everybody, because then I'll know how to advise properly.
And what about QuickBooks? What's your stance on the VAT pilot, and if you're involved with the income tax one too?
Yeah, no, the answer is yes to both. But what I would say is, and again, a fantastic article that you prepared there, Rebecca, which was about a lot of firms haven't even begun to do their client segmentation. So we're talking about joining the pilot, but yet many firms don't actually know who should be going on. So I think the first step should be, let's do some very tight client segmentation, understanding the types of businesses, the sectors. Are they ready for VAT? Will they be next? And what's their personality type like? What's their technology engagement like? A lot of firms haven't even started that work yet.
We're getting a few comments from.
I know why, because you're trying to do that and keep
And
pace
file
of
tax
compliance
returns,
and do the work.
Yeah.
And you're a sole practitioner, so there's one of you, or maybe there's two or three of you. But there's not. You can't outsource. You can't say, department down there, could you look at this for me? And department there, can you do that? You're trying to do it all yourself, and you still have to make money. You still have to have income, so you still have to do fees. So that is the challenge.
Mm-hmm. We're getting sort of towards the end. I think maybe we should sort of summarize. We'll sort of just stop and have a pause. We've got about 5 minutes left, and there are still a few more questions. But we talked about building a resilience, and it's apart from going to the lectures, reading Accounting Web, downloading all the tax guides you can. There's the technical stuff to stay on top of, and the technology stuff to stay on top of. But can we maybe just go through and give a sort of your ideas to the viewers on how you can manage the information flow, the communication, you know, how to get that. I think you talked in terms of trying to get the balance right about what do you tell clients when. Have you got any secret formula, Rebecca? You spend your life telling us.
Yeah, I know, and actually, John, it is easy for me because my practice is small because I'm out on the road. I am building my practice because I have several children who's decided they want to go into accountancy. Heaven alone knows why, but they do. So I'm going to need enough clients to keep them busy. So for me at the moment, it's very easy. I know all my clients really well. I've had most of them for 25, nearly 30 years. But what I'm trying to do is use digital, social media a little bit, although I will admit, embarrassingly, I don't really understand LinkedIn, but I understand Twitter, and trying to just keep pushing little messages out so that they're seeing it all the time and they're getting used to the idea that they're going to have to use digital technology and things like that. As the client base grows, I'm probably going to have to get more disciplined about it, but my son is now working for me a couple of days a week, and he's business development, and so he's looking at ways that we can leverage digital, not only to communicate with clients, but also to cut down the amount of grunt work we do in terms of processing records. Because what I'm finding now is I've got a load where actually I can file the VAT returns 3 weeks early because it's all ready and done. And so, and as opposed to spending 4 weeks slaving over bits of paper, either me or a member of staff, thinking, you know, oh no, I still haven't got everything. So I'm using technology is probably the short answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Now, Fiona, have you talked about you're always struggling to find a balance. Are there any tricks or tips you can pass on that you have worked for you?
I think that's a really hard question because you're dealing with people and personality types. So if you tell people stuff too soon and it might not come to fruition and they're a warrior, they can have you pinned down for an hour and a half explaining minutiae of detail that might not even be necessary for them, or they're what I call a yellow line parker. They don't think any rules apply to them, so they park and do whatever they like, and then so even if you repeatedly tell them, they don't hear. Now, if anybody can find a way or tell me how I can be effectively communicating to those people so they get it, they get the bit they need to get, I would love it.
Nick, can technology solve that problem for
It
us?
most definitely can. I'll go back to Rebecca's point there, and I'll link in my at the very start. We said proactive, about being proactive, and can you just envision talking to the small business and saying, look, rather than what we do now, which is very reactive, there's your tax bill, good luck, apologies if your cash flow is not there to do it, hopefully you can pay it, versus these are the trends that we're seeing, and we're proactively saying you're going to have this much tax to pay, so we can do some sort of tax work, tax planning. I mean, how many small businesses would not want to sign up for that type of service? And I think the enabler to that is technology, minimising and streamlining data in through bank feeds and through mobile apps.
There was a question about if QuickBooks will be able to fit all of its MTD functionality into a smartphone-compatible app, but you got sight of that one yet? I mean, this isn't really a product clinic for QuickBooks, but a quick product update?
No, understood. With regards to QuickBooks Online, our core platform is obviously multi-device, and as part of that experience it is through the mobile app. So both experiences will be through the one platform. So it'll be a seamless experience.
Okay, we're coming. There was one query came in, and it's one that was floating. It was more floating around last year as the big problem, and the year before was property clients. They were the nightmare, and I think it was just somebody was worried about property clients being involved in MTD. Do they need special care and attention this year?
Well, I think the big focus with property clients is making sure they understand how the changes to interest tax relief are going to affect them over the next few years. And the answer to that is they're going to pay more tax. If they've got a mortgage on a let property, they're going to inevitably pay more tax. I've got sons, daughters looking at buying 2-bed properties at the moment, and I'm saying hold back, because certainly the economists think that there's going to be a mass sell-off. It may not be as bad as they paint it, but I think, keeping ahead of the game, showing clients how that's going to work, although, as you say, sometimes you can lead them to water, but they won't drink. Giving them some hard tax figures, and then talking to them about the capital gains tax implications if they take the hit. I think that's the key thing at the moment. Going down the road, MTD, yes, at the moment it looks like if their gross rents are more than 10,000, they'll need some software. They'll have to file their income tax quarterly. Now, whether they do it on spreadsheets, I don't know. But, you know, you need to be bearing that in mind. They won't, of course, be in for VAT because it's an exempt activity, but you need to keep that one sort of just in the peripheral vision.
I mean, are your property clients, is that this year's niggle, or you'll think and worry about that, 2020 when we maybe get on to them?
The property clients I have tend to have quite small portfolios of property, so they might have one or two. I think a lot of people went into it with the idea that would be their pension. So, and if they're highly leveraged, they're going to have trouble, and that's where it's going to start hitting. And I've got a couple that are in that, and then one of them's looking to sell off. But then it depends on where you bought the property. He has property in Aberdeen. Aberdeen property market flat as a pancake because of the oil industry. So, it's not quite the golden goose that it was painted to be at one time.
Yeah, so you will have to become economic forecasters as well. Okay, I think we are over time. We could talk about all of these issues there's so many nuances. I mean, fortunately, that's why we've got your tax handbooks to help the viewers out on the detail. But maybe starting with you, Nick, to wind up. We scratched the surface, but there's some good ideas came out. But what would the top tip, the one idea you have put forward in this webcast that you think people really should go away and put into action?
I think it segments into understanding their workflow today. How are they getting data in today as a firm and as a practice, and is it as efficient as it can be? Because if the answer is no, it's not, then quite clearly we've shared it as our technology platform that can help streamline that.
Fiona, what's your tip for the viewers?
Yeah, I think I agree with the starting point of where Nick is, and then you have to be looking at making it digital now. So when you know what you've got in your bag of goodies, then look at the software, decide what you're going with, and make a start.
Rebecca, last word for you.
Get a bank feed. No more typing in data. No, seriously, it's transformed my practice. It really has.
Well, thank you all for sharing that. It's been a great session. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. There will be another Accounting Excellence webcast in a month's time, but I'd like to thank Rebecca, Fiona and Nick all for their advice. Do keep viewing, and thanks for coming along today.